Access Credit Union has always been at the heart of our community through good and bad times. We want to continue to play our part in helping our community through the COVID-19 crisis. As businesses reopen, we encourage our community to work together by staying local, borrowing locally, and spending locally. Access Credit Union is here to help.
Close your eyes and pull like a dog.
And a new Irish record for Phil Healy, 22.99.
Christy Cooney hands over the Sam Maguire Cup to Graham Canty, Cork All-Ireland champions for the 7th time ever.
Hello and welcome to the Star Sport Podcast. My name is Jack McCarran of the Southern Star, and I'm joined as always by Star Sport editor Kieran McCarthy. Before we kick things off this week, I'd just like to give a gentle reminder to our listeners and viewers to please rate, review and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube. In a few minutes we'll be joined by ex-Cork and Ilen Rovers footballer Diarmuid Duggan to run the rule on a dismal day in Páirc Uí Chaoimh that saw Tipperary crown Munster champions for the first time in 85 years at the expense of Cork. We'll also chat to Enniskeane's Orla Cronin ahead of Cork's All-Ireland semi-final meeting with Kilkenny this Saturday afternoon. But let's jump straight into the fallout from Páirc Uí Chaoimh on Sunday. Diarmuid, I'll come to you first. What was the overriding feeling when the final whistle went on Sunday?
Usually disappointing, to be honest. I think after the highs of beating Kerry in the previous game, I'm not sure, but I think a lot of people probably expected much more from this Cork team. Tipperary had been spoken about and talked up a little bit, some of their key players, and I suppose the fact that they were in All-Ireland semi-final 4 years ago. But it didn't. It seemed to almost fall on deaf ears, really, and Cork just were very disappointing in a lot of people's eyes, and they just didn't perform today. And most of all, they'll be disappointed themselves, more than anyone else, I think, in their own performance. Yeah, Kieran, we'll talk about the game in more detail in a minute, but just your own overriding feeling watching the game. You were obviously there. It was flat. What did you think when the final whistle blew?
It's just a huge opportunity missed for this Cork football team. All the good work of beating Kerry 2 weeks previously, it almost comes for nothing now, because I think this Cork team, it's on a road somewhere. Like it's on an upward curve. The trajectory is positive, but they need something tangible. They need some silverware, something to show for it. And first Munster senior football title since 2012. That would cap a really positive year. But now they've ended the year on a low note. Most people will just think of this season as the season that Cork failed to turn up against Tip and they didn't win a Munster title. That was there for the taking for them. So it's just one of huge disappointment, Jack, to be honest.
Well, we might finish up this chat at the end with a kind of reflection on the season as a whole, but let's jump in to the actual Munster final itself now. And Diarmuid, I want to come to you first on this one, because the Cork defence has come in for some criticism since Sunday, and you'd have to say that they never really got a handle on the two marquee Tipperary forwards, Conor Sweeney and Michael Quinlivan. What went wrong in your own opinion, and what could Cork have done differently on the day?
I think first of all, right from the first minute, Tipperary raced into a 1 point, 2 point, 3 point lead, and I think it became very obvious. That Cork were still, their mindset was still back in Páirc Uí Chaoimh from 2 weeks before and beating Kerry. And I don't know, was it they played Kerry in a nighttime game under lights. They played Tipperary on a beautiful morning, completely different conditions. And for whatever reason, they were just not at the not at the right kind of level, of a Munster final, I think. And it was just very disappointing. But you're right. I think the defence, number one, they were definitely standing too far off their opposing markers. That was very, very obvious in the first minute. And I suppose when you compare that to season campaigners like even Johnny Cooper, Dublin, and these kind of guys, they would not let that happen. And the Tipperary forwards just seemed to get that separation space in order to win the ball. It was just all a little bit too easy for them. And I suppose it's the easy answer is to be critical of the direct opponents and say that they just weren't tight enough. But it looked very much like that Cork they weren't quite sure on what to do in defence, because they had a few men sitting back, kind of trying to dominate space and trying to take up space, and they weren't quite sure where they were going, I think. And it just looked like they didn't have a defined plan on how to stop these guys. Obviously, their direct markers weren't tight enough on Sweeney and Quinlivan to begin with, but even those extra guys that were back didn't seem to know where to go and things like that. And I remember the first water break, one of the Cork defenders having a long chat with Cian O'Neill, and it just looked like they weren't quite sure on what to do with runners coming through in that. So definitely, I think the defence would have to come in for some sort of criticism, but maybe as a team unit and as a defensive unit, maybe the management also, didn't quite get it right in the day, I think.
Kieran, just to move this on a bit then, on the podcast that came after Cork's win over Kerry, me and Diarmuid spoke about the intensity levels that Cork showed throughout. We touched on an incident where Cork gave up a free because they got into Kerry faces. There didn't seem to be that same level of intensity from Cork across the board on Sunday. Do you think that was missing from their defensive setup as well?
100%, Jack. And like Diarmuid mentioned earlier, that Tipperary reeled off 3 points within 3 minutes last Sunday, and they got off to a flying start. And if you think back to the Cork-Kerry game a couple of weeks ago, Ian Maguire got stuck in David Moore, and right before the ball was even thrown in, and that was Ian Maguire and Cork. They were kind of laying down the gauntlet, saying, "We're not going to be pushed over today. We're here to fight you. Like we're going to go to war." But that intensity was not there at all the last day. And when you talk about the Cork defence, which is so inexperienced too, 5 of the starting 6 backs were aged 22 or under. You 3 Cork under 20s from last year starting there. And that inexperience was showing up big time. We talk about the lack of intensity, even going forward. Like how many balls did Cork cough up? You never see Rory Dean coughing up. Like he's a great man to break lines. But he was running into tip defenders left. He was coughing up the ball. Colin O'Callaghan was struggling to make an impact. And that intensity and that, I suppose, that manic work rate, that savage work rate that they showed against Kerry, it was badly lacking the last day. For whatever reason, it's hard to figure out why. I think that's what Cork will reflect on. But it was very noticeable from the start, Jack, that intensity was lacking, and it was lacking all throughout. And instead, it was Tipperary doing all the running. And the one thing I'd say too is Tipperary didn't have to, in the nice way, up their game too much, because they weren't pushed by this Cork team. Cork just seemed timid the last day. They seemed timid even at the second water break. I was looking down at them from the press box, and you just didn't see this. You just didn't see what you wanted to see from a group of guys who were 3 points down in a Munster final, but they were still in with a shot. They were playing badly, but they were still within striking distance. But that work rate intensity ferocity, it just wasn't there.
Diarmuid, one of the players Kieran mentioned there was Ian Maguire, and the dominance in the middle third was practically the winning of the game against Kerry, with the likes of Maguire, Dean, O'Hanlon all having an influence. That seemed to be a little less evident even on Sunday, with Tips, Sidney Swan, who we mentioned last week as well, Colin O'Riordan getting the upper hand a lot of the time. Could Mark Keane have been introduced earlier, because he seemed to have an effect when he came on, winning a couple of big kickouts over Colin O'Riordan?
Yeah, possibly in the air maybe, but I suppose a big indicator very often of a team's hunger and desire is how they work on the breaks. And I think against Kerry, Cork dived in the ball, they died in the ball, they put their bodies in the way and all that. But as Kieran said, all that was lacking the last day, I think. So, in one way you could say that maybe they should have introduced someone else. But, I mean, there wasn't, for all, even Colin O'Riordan's dominance in midfield, there wasn't a huge amount of ball clean out of the sky. A lot of it was breaks. And Tipperary just seemed much, much hungrier on the day, which is a big, big disappointment from a Cork point of view. But also, like Kieran mentioned, the desire there earlier. I think from an offensive point of view as well, there was very, very little support runners. He mentioned Rory a lot of times going down blind avenues and running into walls of 3 and 4. And to be fair to Rory, I think many times he tried to straighten the line and bring a little bit of injection of pace into it, but there was no support runners with him. There was nobody left of him, nobody right of him. And when you compare that into the Tipperary offensive breaks, they were running in packs of 3 and 4, so there was options left and right of the runners all the time. And Cork, for whatever reason, we don't really know, but they didn't seem to have that energy about them the last day. which they brought against Kerry, because you had the likes of Powter running from corner back, you had Flaherty running from corner back, supporting all these runners, but Cork just didn't seem to have that the last day. And an interesting thing actually I noticed as well, I remember watching the game live at the time, and I remember thinking many of the frees, either the outfield frees or sidelines that Cork won, nearly every single time they went either sideways or backwards. And so I watched back the game and I actually took account of it, and I think it was only 2 of those outfield frees that weren't in scoring positions. Now 2 of those outfield frees or sidelines where they went forward, and actually one of them was margin, it was almost sideways. So every other one of them, there was about 8 of them, went backwards. And I mean, I think that's all very well, and it's good to be patient, when a defence is set up against you and things like that. Dublin do it regularly, they go backwards, sideways until they probe, until an opportunity arises. But what was disappointing, I think, about the Cork point of view was they didn't even look to go forward. Every time they wanted a free, they just automatically turned around and went backwards to try and recycle. So as Kieran said there, Tip weren't even pushed. I mean, to get men back, all they had to do then was they literally had to jog back. They didn't even have to sprint back and get set up, because Cork were content to go backwards and sideways instead of, taking a chance and maybe being a little bit more ambitious. And I think that's what was very disappointing as well. Cork didn't show the ambition or the bravery maybe to look forward a little bit quicker and a little bit earlier. And they were very content to play a conservative game. And it's just very disappointing, to be honest. And in many ways, they kind of played the exact same game plan, I think, that they came up with against Kerry. But as we all know, conditions, the game plan against Kerry, I feel, was absolutely perfect, because the conditions dictated that type of game plan, where you hold on to possession, you retain it, and you keep probing until an opportunity arises. But conditions were different the last day against Tipperary. A dry day, a dry sod, the ball was bouncing, and they didn't look forward at any stage, really, which was very disappointing. And even when you think about Tipperary's offensive play, they got a number of marks, which just shows their ambition to go forward and try for those. Cork never really looked like getting a few marks, which could be worth 2 or 3 points in the game, which suddenly closes the gap, So overall, I think their game plan left a lot to be desired, and I think it was quite disappointing from a management point of view, that they were so conservative in their approach as well.
Well, that lack of ambition and lack of bravery that you mentioned kind of feeds into another of their biggest problems that I felt on the day, and that was their lack of a scoring threat, especially after Luke Connolly was withdrawn at half-time. So, as you mentioned, the lack of the bravery to kick it in to the full forward line, essentially, because when they actually did do that, Brian Hurley did make an impact. And so there was a lot of huffing and puffing throughout, but it seemed as though very few were willing to take responsibility. So, Kieran, what would you put that down to? Why is a county like Cork, with one of the biggest football playing populations in the country, unable to have people willing to take that responsibility on the biggest day of the year?
Yeah, because you look at eight fellas or 22 or under who played the last day, and there was a good few making their first appearance in a Munster football final. So to be fair to this Cork team, it's a youthful team. Like I mentioned earlier, so many of the Cork under 20s from last year's All-Ireland women team played. I think there was 5 of them in total. So it's a young Cork team. But you do look to your leaders to stand up on the big day, because that's where they can show encouragement, leadership, and so on. And like I mentioned earlier, Ian Maguire, I thought, had a very good game. He was probably Cork's best performer over the 70 minutes. Mark Collins, the shift he put in was incredible. I remember at one point in the second half, looking back, and he was kind of picking up the ball in his own full back line.
But is that a positive, really? He's supposedly playing in the forward line, and he's one of the better scorers, one of the best scorers on the entire panel, and he's picking up the ball in the full back line with 5 minutes to go in the Munster final. Surely you want your best scoring forwards up close to the opposition goal. So I don't know, Diarmuid, what do you think of the role Mark Collins is playing there?
Yeah, I'd agree. Like, Mark is a fantastic player, no matter where he's playing, whether it's corner forward or whether it's out the field. Definitely Cork are lacking some of those finishers, particularly when Luke Connolly went off, and Mark is a great finisher as well. So I think the game plan that Cork went with, the game plan they went with the last day certainly didn't work, and I think the management would probably be the first to admit that they got it wrong, and that happens in games sometimes, and that's when you're hoping that the players maybe can pick up the pieces and kind of scrape a win, even when things aren't perfectly how they would have planned or whatever. But I would agree that Mark probably should have been playing, certainly in hindsight, but it is always easy in hindsight, of course. I suppose they were hoping that his energy and his work rate around the middle would help, and his ability to kick pass into the extra space created inside him, which he vacated. I suppose I presume that was the idea of it. That would leave more room for Luke Connolly and Brian Hurley inside. But the problem was they didn't kick enough in, and they persisted to run into blind avenues. And they were kind of lone runners. Every time there were lone runners, not enough people running left and right of the ball carrier, I think.
Can I touch on something, Jack, that Diarmuid mentioned there? And I suppose it's the marquee forwards. When you look at Tip, did Sweeney and Quinlivan, and they kicked 12 points between them, they're exceptional. And you look at Cork's forwards, and I think it actually opens up an interesting kind of conversation, like we've had a long winter ahead of us. But have Cork enough marquee forwards to push themselves into that next level, that top level? To be fair to Brian Hurley and Colin O'Mahony, when he came on, they were very isolated inside there. But when you look at the Cork attack over the last couple of games, they created no kind of goal chance from open play. I know Mark Keane got the goal against Kerry, and that was such an important score, but that came out of it just a pot shot from Luke Connolly. Go back to last year's championship, Cork were banging in goals. They got 3 against Roscommon, they got 2 against Tyrone, they got 3 against Kerry, they got a couple against Limerick, they scored against Dublin. But that good threat was badly lacking in this year's championship. And I think the opposition have wised up the Cork's kind of running game, because I think it's very easy, and Diarmuid might know better, like to set up defensively against Cork now, because you know how they're going to play their, I suppose, the over-reliance on hand passing, this running game. And it's just interesting too, before the Cork-Kerry game, Peter Keane in the press conference made mention of Cork's goal threat last year. Before, after the game against Tip the last day, David Power, the Tip manager, actually made reference to Cork's goal threat as well. So I think they've almost wised up to how this Cork team is playing. And I just think the Cork attack is lacking something. And I think it was very evident the last day. Kind of have Cork had a player who could score 5-6 points from open play. Maybe on a good day, someone might. But a team that can consistently get those scores. Look at Kerry, Dave Clifford. Look at Cork. Look at Dublin. They have Dean Rock and a couple of more. Keelan O'Connor up in Mayo. Kind of all the big teams seem to have that go-to man, that go-to forward. But when you're looking at the Cork team right now, I find it hard to pick which fellow will get you 5, 6, 7 points from open play. I know Luke Connolly's superb. On a good day, he might get 1-5. But another day, then he might finish at 2 points and get subbed off after 40 minutes. So I think it's an interesting one just to see kind of going forward, pardon the pun, what Cork can do with their attack to get more out of it. And are the players even there in the county at the moment? I saw Michael Shields put up a tweet after the game, mentioned that Stephen Sherlock wasn't even in the squad. So it's just, I think it's an interesting one for the Cork management to muse over the next couple of weeks and months.
Diarmuid, do you want to come in there on the lack of a Cork scoring threat?
Yeah, I think they are there. I think, first of all, you have to set up the correct environment for these forwards to flourish. And I mean, if you're slow in leaving in the ball and it gives an opportunity for opposing teams to get 10 and 12 players behind, it doesn't matter, I think, whether you're Dean Rock, whether you're David Clifford, it doesn't matter who you are, I think, if you're just going to be running into crowds of 3 and 4 people. So I think Cork need to find a way, whatever way that is, they need to find a way to deliver the ball early when there's space into these guys. Because I think, given the right environment, I think the likes of Brian Hurley, Colin O'Mahony in the future, Luke Connolly, these guys, I think, Colin O'Mahony showed it under 20 level. He's one of the best in the country at that age group, at that age level. So I don't think there's any reason why he can't progress on further. But Cork need to come up with a way in which they can allow these forwards to flourish, because I think it's very easy, to base it all on a couple of games this year. And everybody knows this was Cork's predominant game is a running game, and they are usually pretty effective with it because they have strong athletic runners, and we are good at that. But it can be too easy to stop, I think, if teams cop on to what they're doing. So I think they need to come up with another system in which we can allow, or an environment in which we can allow these forwards to flourish, and that really means leaving the ball in early and finding a system of doing that.
Okay then, well, let's look ahead to the future for Cork football quickly. And we said that the loss takes the shine off the Kerry win, but it's still been a good season. promotion from Division 3, a championship win over a top 3 or 4 team, and a hugely important amount of championship minutes for some of the younger generation. Ronan McCarthy's term is up, but surely he has to be given another crack at this after leading what's essentially been a positive rebuild over the last few years. So Diarmuid, I'll come to you first on that one. What do you think is the next step Cork need to take?
Yeah, I think it's important not to base, for Ronan himself and for the Cork County Board, I think it's important not to base any decision, on one game this year. So certainly not after this Tipperary game, because, when you look back after Kerry, people were lauding Ronan McCarthy after the tactical awareness and everything that he put together in order to beat Kerry, So I think you probably have to take the whole his whole term of 3 years. So I think the very first year they were beaten heavily by Kerry. Last year they were very unlucky in championship, and they ended up having a good run in the Super 8s. Taking Dublin to 60 minutes, really, staying with them for that long. And then this year, obviously beating Kerry was a huge plus, and it ended with the disappointment to Tipperary. But I suppose, having said that as well, in his time they went down to Division 3, and last year they ended up winning Division 3 league as well. So I suppose you have to take it in the whole. But one interesting thing I think that Ronan mentioned after the Kerry game was, he said that when he came first, he felt that an important thing he had to do was change the culture within the Cork setup. Now, I'm not privy to it, Kieran isn't, you aren't. We're not privy to what was actually going on, within the dressing room walls or whatever. But if that is true, and if he has changed the culture of Cork football in terms of work ethic and attitude and all that, then I think that's a huge, huge positive, because Cork football was never going to be like a switch where you can turn it on and suddenly we'll be winning All-Irelands. It was always going to take time, and results were never going to be instant. So I think if that is something that is a legacy of Ronan's, where he's changed the culture now, you have guys who are willing to work hard and train hard for each other, then I think that's a huge plus. But going forward, I suppose, I don't know whether it'll be Ronan's decision or whether it'll be a county board decision, but I suppose the county board need to take a holistic approach on it and a view on it and see whether they have made progress over these 3 years. My own feeling is that I think they have. I think, if the season ended after Kerry last week, a lot of people's opinion would be that Cork are making serious progress here. So I think you wouldn't want to base it in one disappointing game, because Cork players know themselves they were disappointing last Sunday. The management will know they were disappointing, So I think it's a tough one, but I suppose Ronan will know himself whether he feels he can get more out of this group or not, and I suppose it's up to the county board really after that.
Kieran, you're writing about Ronan McCarthy in your column this week. Would you echo much of what Diarmuid's saying there?
100%. I think Diarmuid hit the nail on the head there, especially when it comes to that kind of the cultural change. Ronan wants players who want to put Cork football first, and I think that's so important. I think back to Ronan's first year in charge, and I was up in Portlaoise after Tyrone beat Cork. It was 320 to 13 points, and that was a terrible day. That was a really bad performance, and that was a huge low for this Cork football team. Just my little helper again. But since then, in the past 18 months, Cork under Ronan McCarthy and the management team that he's put in place, would include Cian O'Neill, who was a very shrewd acquisition, and Kevin Smith there as well. They've definitely made progress in the last 18 months. And Ronan mentioned after the last day that I suppose the big kind of disappointment for him is that this young Cork group missed out on the chance to test themselves in an All-Ireland semi-final against Mayo and Croke Park, because he wants to see Cork involved in the big days on the big stage. And I feel that Ronan should be given another term. I think he's made enough progress over the last 18 months, and he's bringing through this kind of new youthful wave. And I think he needs to see through a little bit more. Maybe Ronan won't be there to see this team come to reach its potential in a couple of years' time. But I think it's a very important job now to continue on the kind of that upward trend that they have enjoyed over the last 18 months. People will be very, very quick to hammer the Cork footballers again after what we saw last Sunday. I know kind of it used to be said that the only consistent element about the Cork footballers in recent years was their inconsistency. But to be fair to them, over the last 18 months, I can't recall a performance as bad as they showed last Sunday against Tip. they've definitely got better in terms of consistency. They were putting up to the big teams last year. There's going to be setbacks along the way. There's going to be bumps and bruises. That was a particularly bad setback on Sunday. But I think Cork still need to take the positives from what they've achieved this year, and that was getting straight back out of Division 3 and back up to Division 2. And next year, Cork would face the likes of Mayo in Division 2, Meath are there, Kildare are there, Clare are there. So it's the next step up. We're probably all asking too much to expect this Cork team to win an All-Ireland in the next 3 years. But they're building towards something, and that should be a Munster Championship. Whether it's next year or the year after, that should be the target there. But I think Ronan should stay there because I think there are better days ahead for this current group.
Well, let's leave it on that positive note then. Better days ahead for Cork after a disappointing Munster final loss. Thanks a million, Diarmuid, and thanks, Kieran.
Access Credit Union has always been at the heart of our community through good and bad times. We want to continue to play our part in helping our community through the COVID-19 crisis. As businesses reopen, we encourage our community to work together by staying local, borrowing locally, and spending locally. Access Credit Union is here to help.
On Saturday at 12:30, Cork meet Kilkenny in the All-Ireland Senior Camogie semi-final at Páirc Uí Chaoimh. Enniskeane's Orla Cronin was in flying form for Paddy Murray's side in the quarter-final win over Clare, scoring 6 points. And Kieran, she caught up with you ahead of Saturday's game. How is Orla keeping?
She's in good form, Jack. Huge game for the Cork Camogie team this Saturday in Páirc Uí Chaoimh against Kilkenny. Go back to last year, and Cork bowed out to the All-Ireland series at the semi-final stage to Galway. So Paddy Murray's team, they're intent on getting back to an All-Ireland final. And you'd like to think that they have a very good chance. Kilkenny are flying, to be fair to them. But Cork are more than well. It's a pretty kind of, there's a few new faces in this Cork team this year, and Paddy Murray's he's building another pretty impressive side. And Orla Cronin is a huge part of that. We've spoken about her a lot in the podcast. I suppose the improvements that she's made, and she's shown that again in this year's championship. She's scored 20 points in 3 games. She's Cork's top scorer. She has a 100% record from frees in the championship so far, which is an incredible rate to have. She's the 5th top scorer in the championship as a whole. So from those couple of headline stats alone, you could see that Orla Cronin is really continuing to take her game to the next level. And that's what Cork need, because they were out the likes of Orla Cotter and Gemma O'Connor. So they need Orla Cronin, they need Laura Tracy in defence, Amy O'Connor in attack. They need these players to kind of stand up and lead the way if Cork want to get back to another All-Ireland final. So as you'll hear from the chat now with Orla, she's in good form. And we started by just having a quick look back at Enniskeane's recent county intermediate championship win. Delighted to be joined on the Star Sport podcast by Orla Cronin, Cork Camogie star. But before we talk about Cork's game against Kilkenny this Saturday, I have to congratulate you, Orla. I haven't spoken to you since Enniskeane were crowned county intermediate Camogie champions a couple of weeks ago at this stage. So huge congratulations on that. Like, that must have felt like a huge monkey off the back.
Yeah, that was massive actually. It doesn't even seem that long ago, but I think since the sport, started up again after the lockdown, things kind of happened very quickly, and all of a sudden we kind of found ourselves back in a county final again. But we had a difficult enough path. We overcame Blackrock there with a really big game in the quarter final. Father O'Neill's as well in the semi, and so I have Bollock then another really tough battle in the final again. But I think it's definitely a highlight of the year so far for me, and all the girls too. I think we were just so happy to get the job done, for once and for all, and get up to the senior ranks. So it's been class.
And that was brilliant. It's definitely one of the kind of GA stories of the year, because you were so close for so many years and you finally got over the line this year, which is absolutely brilliant. And like you said, you've senior camogie to look forward to next year in the Cork County Championship. But switching in from club to county, how did you find that, Orla?
I suppose I found it quite difficult actually. It's everything is very much a shorter season, in both club and county. And I guess there wasn't much of a break or a let off at all, you know, between the club and county. So it was quite difficult. I suppose I was back on the Tuesday training, you know, with Cork after the county final win with Enniskeane. So, you know, you'd be coming off such a high, and then just to kind of get back to a different start of the season then with Cork. It's kind of going from, you know, the end of one to the start of the other. It is really hard, and, you know, when you don't even get much of a break in between, I guess more mentally it was kind of tough more than anything. So yeah, I guess I did find that kind of tough. And then again, you know, you are playing at a different standard when it comes to county. So, you know, there wasn't much time to really think about the success you've had with club, because it's a whole different ball game, you know, and you're coming to county standard and county level. But yeah, I did give myself maybe a week or two grace, you know, to kind of get back physically and mentally into the county thing. And I suppose kind of once we started off the games, then there was kind of no thinking about the club. Yeah, so that was it really. But it was tough, yeah, you know, with the seasons being really short and that.
And I suppose Cork had longer to wait for your championship debut than most. You got the walk over from Offaly in the first game of the group stage. So then it was kind of straight into the Wexford game, and that's a game you came through. Was a 3-12 to 1-8. Cork won. Was that a game kind of just to dust off the cobwebs, kind of get rid of the dirty petrol out of the system and just try and get it up and running again?
Yeah, I think so. Like, we were so long waiting for our first game. Like, obviously that Offaly walkover that we got wasn't ideal, you know, because we hadn't had a game since the league earlier on there back in February, something like that. I think it was nearly 250 days or something, you know, since we had last had a game. So it was a really long break, and I think it's very hard, I suppose, for every team to kind of pick up where they left off, you know, with the league and the big break in between. So yeah, coming into that Wexford game, you know, I think we were waiting around so long. We really just wanted to kind of see where we were. And I think, I suppose, how we performed that day kind of showed that you know, we were a little bit rusty. It mightn't have been as free flowing as we'd like to have had it. But, you know, it was a good one just to get done. It was a tough battle against Wexford. You know, they've improved now again in the last few years. So I think it was a nice one to see where we were and just want to get over it and move on to the next round. I think all we kind of needed was to just get the campaign off and started. And I think each game since, we've kind of learned, you know, a lot from each one of them.
Talking about learning a lot from each game, it was then on up to Galway to take on the All-Ireland champions in their own backyard. And obviously Galway got the better of Cork in last year's semi-final just by the narrowest of margins. And you were kind of travelling up there. Both teams already knew that you were through to the knockout stages. It was just to decide who will go straight to the semi, who will go to the quarter-final. And Galway won 15 points to 12, and it was Rebecca Hennelly with those, I suppose, 2 sideline cuts, which were worth 4 points that made the difference. But I saw an interview with Hannah Looney from the beginning just gone, and what she said stood out to her that day was the character that Cork showed up in Galway. Was it the same for you? Because I suppose she was saying she was a little bit kind of, I suppose trepidation is the wrong word, but seeing what had happened the year before, she was kind of waiting to see what Cork would show up. And the Cork team that showed up really, really pushed Galway all the way.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think since that draw was made, you know, earlier on in the year, it was one that we've been looking forward to, I guess, all year. Because, you know, I think Hannah mentioned it too, like, we were very disappointed after last year's semi-final defeat. And yeah, I don't think we did ourselves justice. And I think Hannah spoke as well of the intensity, you know, that Galway brought that day. And I suppose we felt that we didn't, you know, match that, or, you know, we didn't handle that as well as we wanted to or could have. And I guess that was something that we had in mind maybe going up to Galway the last day, that, you know, we weren't going to play as we did last year again in the semi. You know, we weren't going to, you know, let them play more intense than us, or, you know, back down to that kind of intensity that they bring. So I guess, yeah, you know, it was a funny game in a way. We were both qualified for either a quarter or a semi, so it was all kind of about a performance that day. And yeah, I think we did show a lot of character, you know, and yeah, like those sideline cuts by Rebecca Henley, you know, will she ever get those again? You just don't know. But I mean, it's going to be more common now. So yeah, there was very little between us that day. I think Galway appreciated a tough game as well, because, you know, they probably had handy enough games coming up to that. So I think it probably stood to both of us. But yeah, I think we were very happy kind of walking away that day, and you know, we've gotten through the quarter now, so I think we're kind of building each week we go out.
Just on those sideline cuts for a second, what a skill that is, you know, and what you saw too that weekend is they got so much kind of social media exposure. You'd everyone looking in at these two magnificent sideline cuts that, like we said, were worth 4 points, and it just gave camogie more exposure that weekend, because even people who were probably don't watch camogie in the normal run of things were watching this and saying, Jesus, that's some skill.
Yeah, they were unreal. Like, I even remember thinking on the field, God, like, you know, she did 2 straight after each other, you know, like you'd be saying brilliant for the first one, but the second one was just like even better again. And I think Chloe Sigerson had a chance then soon after, and like hers just went just wide. So, you know, it's definitely a thing that we in camogie should be practicing a bit more, especially when they're worth 2 points. You know, it's a lot, but it can be done. So yeah, I think like just that definitely promoted the skill that, you know, is on show for camogie. Yeah, so look, there might be a few more sideline cuts like that to come in the championship.
Hopefully they'll be in Cork's favour this Saturday. But like you mentioned there, Orla too, you kind of came off the back of the Galway defeat and into an All-Ireland quarter-final against Clare, and 3-15 to 8 points you won by in the end. But that game was a lot closer than that scoreline suggested. It in Cork, like you finished so strong to put Clare away. But was that just a test you needed as well for maybe 50 minutes of that game to prepare you for what's coming against Kilkenny this weekend?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I mean, I think no game really is going to be won in the first 30 minutes anymore, or, you know, it's not going to be won in the first 45 minutes. It's going to have to go the full 60, you know. So I think we knew against Clare that they were going to put up that battle to us for as long as they could. You know, they really kept us, you know, out defensively very well for a lot of that game. But I guess that's where, you know, our kind of resilience and, you know, attitude has to come in. Coming up against better teams, you know, there's always a chance there to get the win in the end. So I think that quarterfinal against Clare will stand to us, you know, and ensure that we can keep going the full 60 minutes and, you know, hopefully come out the better side of results, you know. So yeah, we've a big challenge against Kilkenny now this weekend, and I guess both of us really will kind of fancy our chances. You know, there's been nothing really between us, you know, the last few years. So yeah, look, you know, we'll see how it goes.
You were motoring pretty well against Clare, and I'm just going to read you a tweet that Aoife Murray, she's so decorated as obviously as a Cork goalkeeper, retired now, but she said movement from Orla Cronin was outstanding again, great game for Cork. When you get praise like that, Orla, and you have kind of written about it in the Southern Star extensively, that you have kind of become one of the leaders of this Cork team, and you're so integral to how the attack operates. When you hear praise like that from someone like Aoife Murray, like how does that sit with you?
Yeah, that's great. Sure, like I'm mad about Aoife, and we've had a great relationship, you know, down through the years. And I guess, you know, Aoife would probably know a lot of us on the team now more than anyone else. So I suppose it's easy for her to maybe see those kind of things within my game, you know, maybe that others mightn't see. But yeah, you know, it's great to kind of get that acknowledgement. But look, I think that movement is just part of hard work that kind of has to come with everyone. And, you know, if you're not moving, you're not going to get yourself in the game. So, or you're not going to create opportunities, you know, for other people around you. So I guess that's kind of, you know, my goal every game is to work as hard as I can off the ball as I can on the ball. And, you know, with hopefully good results come out of that then.
Like just mentioned Aoife there, obviously Aoife has retired from camogie, so Amy Lee's in goal, and it's one of a number of changes on this Cork team. I think your average age against Clare was 24, and there's been a 3 or 4 kind of championship debutants as well this year, kind of, and with Gemma O'Connor and Julia White kind of injured as well, the likes of yourself, Amy O'Connor, Laura Tracy, Hannah, like if you had to take on more of a leadership role even again to kind of steer Cork through the season.
Yeah, I think so. I think especially this year now, I suppose every year we're kind of saying that there's a team in transition, and, you know, we've kind of new players coming in some shape or form each year. But yeah, you know, without those players that you mentioned there, say Gemma, Aoife obviously is a massive loss, and Orla Cotter. So I suppose those 3 that we have been without so far this year have been a really big loss, you know, and big boots to fill. So I guess, like myself, Amy, Laura Tracy, Hannah, you know, we've been playing with them for a number of years now too, that I guess we've learned a lot off them, and, realise that I suppose it's more up to us now, than anyone else to kind of carry the team and, bring the others along again. So I guess it just kind of happens organically, really, and you kind of have no other choice, and you kind of fit into that role, I suppose, without even realising it. But yeah, you do have an onus on you to help the new girls that are in, and the debutantes, that have started. So yeah, look, it's I suppose it's kind of natural thing now for us.
And leaders will be important this Saturday in Páirc Uí Chaoimh when Cork take on Kilkenny in the All-Ireland's semi-final. Your two teams that know an awful lot about each other, you've met so many times over the years in big games, 2 All-Ireland finals, All-Ireland semi-finals. What do you expect of them this weekend?
Yeah, I think they're going to be a really good side. We're going to be up against it, I think. But look, I think that both of us will fancy our chances, playing in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, I guess that is, some sort of advantage for us in home venue, and a lovely pitch as everybody's seen the last number of weeks. But I think it'll suit both of us, and I think it'll be an opportunity for both teams, to showcase, a really good game. Kilkenny have been down this road, so many times the last number of years that they won't fear it, and I guess we've been the same. So there's going to be nothing in it. I think we're going to expect the same as always from them. That physical battle, the pace and all that. We will expect it. So I don't know. We'll see who comes out on the best side now on Saturday.
I know I've talked to obviously Paddy Murray countless times over the years, and he's a man who's never happy to sit still, and he was even saying after the Clare game that he wants Cork to take it on to another level against Kilkenny. But I presume that you can know that yourselves, that you need to just kind of up the performance that much more to get to that final.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's in us, I think the last few games we have learned a lot. We've been figuring out a lot of things as we've gone on, and as I said, it's been hard for every team, I guess, to kind of pick up where from your training that you did at the start of the year to kind of have it ticking again over when you come to this stage, because the weeks have come so fast, you kind of don't have much time to realize maybe things that you can fix. But I think we've acknowledged a lot of those areas that we need to change, or areas that we need to work on, and I think we've been building each game and figuring out what could work best for us. So yeah, look, I mean, whatever way we play, all it's going to take is playing our hearts out, I guess, on Saturday, working as hard as we can, and hopefully that will pay off then.
And how much looking forward to playing in Páirc Uí Chaoimh? The pitch is looking sensational the last couple of weeks. It's in Topnick.
Yeah, it's brilliant, and so lucky that we get to play there second time. Obviously we had the quarterfinals there, and it's just an added boost again that we get to play the semi-final there. But I think it's a no-brainer, really. You look at all the pitches around the country, and it looks like the best surface at the moment. So it's made for hurling, it's made for a fast game, and it's brilliant to be able to say that coming into December, that you can still have that summer hurling approach inside in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. So yeah, I can't wait for it.
And hopefully we'll all be celebrating the Cork win this Saturday. The very best of luck, Orla.
Great, thanks a million, Kieran.
Access Credit Union has always been at the heart of our community through good and bad times. We want to continue to play our part in helping our community through the COVID-19 crisis. As businesses reopen, we encourage our community to work together by staying local, borrowing locally, and spending locally. Access Credit Union is here to help.
Welcome back to the Star Sport podcast, and before we wrap things up here, you might just give us an idea of what readers can expect in this week's Southern Star Sports section.
Yeah, plenty good on this week, Jack, and we picked the bones over Cork's defeat to Tip in last Sunday's Munster final. John Hayes shares his thoughts on the big game. We've reaction from both camps as well, and as well as that, then we look forward to the Cork Kilkenny game as well, with interviews with Paddy Murray, Hannah Looney and Orla Cronin, so plenty of reading there. An interesting one, Jack, is Ronan McCarthy picks his top 10 sports books of the year, so they're ideal Christmas presents for the sports fan in your life, so that's one worth checking out. We also look at the rise of Ilen Rovers, who are celebrating their 25th anniversary. They're a soccer club doing great things at the moment, and great to see as well. Gavin Coombs was at his try-scoring best form again for Munster on Monday night when they won away to Glasgow. And for the second match in a row, Gavin Coombs was named man of the match. So this was the worst Cork rugby mafia, as they've been described on social media a couple of times. They continue to go from strength to strength. So it's a pretty action-packed sports section again this week, Jack.
Okay, Kieran, sounds good. And if you can't make it to the shops to pick up a copy, you can always purchase an edition of. You can purchase our digital edition online. Just go to www.thesouthernstarTV/e-paper and you can read the Southern Star for less than €2 per week. Thanks for listening to the Star Sport Podcast. We'll be back at the same time next week. If you enjoy these shows, please make sure to rate, review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Slán Tongal.